Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. There have been calls for farmers to switch to a cage-free environment. Cage-free refers to farm environments where laying hens live in open indoor spaces. Now, one of the organizations who's been calling for this is Southern Africa Faith Communities Environment Institute. I'm joined now by Institute's Zwelisha, Shobede, as well as Sonia Moutford, who is the owner of Eategrity. A very good afternoon to you both. Thank you so much for your time. Zwelisha, let's perhaps start with you. We're hearing that this is the worst outbreak of the avian flu that we've seen in South Africa. Can you provide an overview of the current avian flu situation in South Africa and its impact on egg production and availability? In your view, has the avian flu outbreak exposed the vulnerabilities in the current egg production system in South Africa, and how so?
Thank you very much, Mpo. I think it's clear for everyone to see what has been happening in South Africa with the avian flu because it's out there for everyone to see. And I think it's highlighting the need for a switch to a healthier and more sustainable production system in South Africa. And we've been calling for cage-free for a change because those systems ensure that we mitigate these outbreaks and make sure that the eggs that people are consuming are healthy, and also they're always readily available. They're not scarce as they are today. So I think it's important that we go back, we highlight that there is a need for a change. We need to go back to healthier and more sustainable systems, and cage-free is that system. And I think it's really important that we highlight that and we make sure that the public do know about this so that we can better handle this going forward, because this is the worst outbreak we've had since the last one in 2017, and we can't keep on having these outbreaks, so we need to do something about it.
Sonia, what vulnerabilities do you think the current egg production system in South Africa has been exposed to because of this?
Well, the concern is that we've had a dual outbreak, which we've never really encountered before, and in particular now we have a new virus, a new type of avian flu virus, which is the H7N1. And there are daily reports of outbreaks. And historically, what has been happening with avian flu is quite seasonal. And it starts becoming less of a problem as we move closer to summer. But with the H7N6 virus, which is the dominant strain, as I said, it's circulating still, and that's quite unusual. So the current outbreak has already resulted in the culling of 5 million birds, and that clearly has an impact on industry and what they are producing. And we have culled 13 million chickens since 2017. And in 2017, as Zwelisha said, that's when we first encountered avian flu. And at that time, we shed 1,300 jobs. Industry shed 1,300 jobs. So I'm actually quite concerned and waiting to see, are we going to be shedding any more jobs? We already see that some of the retailers are rationing eggs now. We have Woolworths and Pick n Pay. They are rationing eggs. And particularly in the Gauteng, which seems to be the provinces that are most hit by this particular H7N6. There seems to be a shortage of eggs there. The other concern is that when we're looking at restocking, we haven't been told if the breeding houses, if they have been impacted by this as well. So what I'm concerned about right now is that there is talk about importing eggs. And we are very much of the opinion where we want to support local farmers. We want to keep this industry healthy, firstly in the way they produce, so that they are more resilient to these avian flu outbreaks. And we want to support the local farmers. And I've had farmers, message me this morning, basically speaking about their concerns and saying, we actually have eggs, but we don't have the market access.
Yeah, market access speaks to a much bigger problem when it comes to how eggs are distributed and who gets access. That in itself is a challenge that also needs to be addressed because it speaks to the red tape in the industry. Zwelisha, what is your view on this?
I think, as you said, it's another topic on its own. It really is, unfortunate that we're having this conversation now at the time of a crisis. And I think we need to have bigger conversations about this crisis, and before we even have crisis, because as Sonia said, that is going to be a thing that retailers and corporations are going to say. There's that market issue with the pricing and making sure that they also make money out of this business. So I think we need to get to a point whereby we talk about these things transparently and way beforehand, and make sure that we have, an agreement in place, a policy in place that protects everyone involved, from farmers until the consumers. So I think these also just bring us back to that point to say, let us go back, let us work on this, let us have important conversations, and let us not use a crisis to have us talk about things. Let us try to avoid having crises to actually talk about things. So I think it goes back to the policy, the lack of the policies, and actually going back to different ways of doing egg productions, and making sure that we, as Sonia said, support local farmers and involve people, the public, and the broader community into this egg production issue and this, farmed system that we have currently, so that we can make sure that even the pricing, even the market is fair and level for everyone in terms of the playing field.
Yeah. So, Sonia, with all those challenges, being brought to the forefront, I mean, what will it take to get to those discussions? Because earlier in the week, I was speaking to another expert in the space who was speaking to what you referred to when it comes to government's contingency plans, now looking to get fertilized eggs outside our borders, and speaking about the access, who will get those eggs first in terms of priority. It's definitely not going to be small farmers who are operating on that scale.
Exactly. And historically, even with restocking from the breeding houses, the small-scale farmers have had to wait in line. So they've actually had to keep their birds for longer periods. And obviously, egg production also reduces during that time, the longer they keep their birds, and they're not able to restock. The other concern that's also happening is that I read this morning on an email that I received, a fair player was saying that they are now looking at using a vaccine. And that is a concern for me, and I'm going to ruffle some feathers now, I know, because we are looking at these technocratic band-aids for a systemic problem. And, culling, which they euphemistically call stamping out, hasn't worked. The biosecurity hasn't worked. We've had this problem since 2017. It's seasonal. And all that industry is implementing is to be able to continue business as usual. And we're saying, as Zwelisha was saying, let's be proactive about this. Now we're going to be introducing a vaccine, and they're going to be waiving the 2-year test time to bring in this vaccine. And this is a global decision. They've had global talks about this. And my concern is that is this the approach that we should be taking? Should we rather be having the precautionary principle? Should we rather be looking as globally, particularly in the UK now, there's a lot of media talk about the connection between avian flu and the outbreaks that they're experiencing in Europe as well, and the systems that these birds are being kept in. So I just think that we need to have more transparency, as Zwelisha also mentioned. There is a study that was released, well not released, a study that was done by the National Agricultural Marketing Council, and we don't have access to that. It's not a public study, but it keeps on being quoted, from industry to say how much more expensive the move is going to be towards these cage-free. Well, they looked at free range actually, and we're not asking for free range, as you correctly. It's actually amazing to see that someone gets the understanding between cage-free and free range. So we're not asking for free range, we're asking for cage-free. And we need access to how they came to the numbers. And one of the places I think we should be looking at, and ruffling feathers again, is that there is room to move with the profit margins of the retailers. When I speak to the farmers and they tell me this is my farm gate price, but this is what the retailers are selling it for, we have consumers that want to be supporting cage-free, want to be supporting pasture-raised and free-range, but those products are priced out of the market for them, and they shouldn't be. 1 year, and it's not, and what I've looked at as well, with the little information that's been made available, the difference between the producer and the retail price doesn't necessarily correlate when the retailer actually increases prices quite dramatically. So, for example, in 2020, there was a markup of 137%.
Sure.
And then in 2019, there was only a 90%, but the farm gate price was exactly the same price during 2019 and 2020. So I think we need to be supporting firstly the producers. I think we need to be looking at how we can assist them to make these changes to cage-free. And the retailer needs to come into this conversation with regards to the room to move within those profit margins.
Zwelisha, how, or perhaps in what ways, do you see transitioning to cage-free egg production as a solution to both the avian flu crisis and the humane treatment of egg-laying hens?
I think with making the change to cage-free, obviously, I know in South Africa, Sonia was mentioning about free range. I think it's the first step in the right direction to switch to going cage-free, to ensure that these hens are at least going out there and expressing themselves and doing their natural behaviors, because in those cages they can't do that. And if they're cramped in those cages and unable to even do that, obviously they're going to be easily affected by disease and easily, prone to getting diseases. So they need to be out there. They need to actually be able to be hens, and then having that humane treatment, can actually translate to quality of the eggs that they lay, and because they're not stressed, they're not compacted over each other, and they're not even, having some injuries. So I think making that switch to cage-free directly translates to treating them humanely and making sure that they are treated better, and then that way they're going to produce eggs that are going to be, high in nutrition for consumers, and also making sure that consumers are getting value for their money. So I think that way everybody wins, and that is the holistic approach that I think we need to take in ensuring that the hens are healthy, the eggs are healthy, and the conditions and the systems are changing, and we're trying to change the systems in order to also avoid these types of outbreaks and to mitigate these types of outbreaks, because Sonia is talking about importing vaccines. That costs money, and that money is going to be, paid by the consumer, unfortunately, which is unfair. So we need to think about this holistically and make sure that we mitigate and we make sure we avoid having this type of outbreaks, because Sonia is saying they're seasonal. And so maybe if we do have them in that season, they're not as bad as we're having them now. So we need to think about changing, think about improving the system, improving the treatment of the hens, and making sure that they're healthy and they're able to be hens, as we're able to be human beings. So it's all interlinked, and I think it is high time that we look at that and we have a think about that and we make a switch, because it all trickles down. And then, unfortunately, the person who suffers the most is the person who's working hard right now, trying to get protein from these eggs, and that is really unfair. I think we need to have a look at that, please.
Sonia, you touched on this a little bit. I mean, in terms of a response to critics who may argue that cage-free egg production may not completely eliminate the risks associated with avian flu, and the biosecurity measures are equally important, aren't they?
I agree that the biosecurity measures are important, but we have to ask the questions, would these industry responses be necessary? Because they weren't necessary before we had factory farming. These outbreaks weren't taking place. So it's a modern disease in a sense, and particularly the mutation and the rapid spread, how quickly it spreads. And again, with industry now wanting to bring in a vaccine, the one thing that I need to, and I've looked at the historical hesitancy of industry using vaccines, And the reason for that is that they actually haven't worked in, the disease, highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, which is avian influenza, is still endemic in these countries that have most used vaccines. That's China, Egypt, it was Vietnam and Indonesia. So historically, the vaccines have not worked. And I would like to know what the difference is. They've got a new type of vaccine now, and that is also a concern to me. They can say, well, this is a new vaccine that's going to work. It's going to eradicate these viruses, but it hasn't been tested. And we're even passing that 2-year obligatory test that would normally take place. And I just feel like we are rushing into something without really interrogating it. And should it, when we have these kind of under pressure decisions and that, it's because industry has not been proactive about this, have refused to have the conversation, to have honest, authentic conversations about the cage-free egg campaign. And the sad thing is that this isn't the first time industry has been asked to move towards cage-free eggs. This is a 2-decade request. This goes way back.
And how then do we try and perhaps bring a better response to the argument around cage-free egg production being more expensive? How do you then address those concerns around the expenses and around the big changes that farmers will need to make?
Well, the one question that I asked when we just had some of the glimpses into the NAMC, there was a summary that was sent out with the NAMC study. And firstly, it was focusing on free range, and their costs were focusing on that. But there are retrofitting possibilities where you just remove the front of the cage, which is like an aviary system. It becomes an aviary system then. So for me, in my mind, we should be having those discussions as to how can we retrofit what we already have. The other concern is that government and industry are training emerging farmers in the cage system. These cage systems have a lifespan, or you pay off over 10 years, then they have another 10-year lifespan. And industry is saying, and industry said this in 2015 already, we will not move to cage-free until 2039. So they've stuck by their guns because they're doubling down on that now. But what is the motivation for 2039? After 2039, they're going to give another 10 centimeter amount of space. Where's the science in that? And where is the financial reasoning around that? We don't get that. We really don't get that. But we can't have these honest discussions if we are not privy to the information. This is an incredibly opaque industry. For me to get onto a farm, I have to jump through hoops. I'm not allowed to take any recording advices in there. And it's very difficult for even consumers to understand. They don't even know that 95% of our hens are in cages. Only 1% cage-free and 4% are free range. And then if I talk to these farmers, they say, look, we're there. We're able to provide eggs to these retailers, but they're not giving us a fair price.
Yeah.
And these farmers are the farmers that also need to be part of these discussions. They're not. They're completely sidelined. And I just feel that with this threat of now importing eggs, what is it also going to do to the farmers that are producing eggs, particularly if the retailers are getting very good prices from the importing of the eggs, from the producers.
Yeah. We're going to have to leave it there for now. And let me thank you both for your time and really engaging on this conversation, which is a much longer one, but we're going to have to cut it short. Sonia Moutford, who is the owner of Eategrity, as well as Zwelisha, Shobede, Cage-Free Campaign Coordinator. Thank you both for your time.